right, welcome to Your Time, Your Money, the show where your time is just as valuable as your money. And we know that. I'm here with my partner, Matt Tarullo, today.
Mark, what's going on? Glad to be back. I'm excited. We're on the heels of a monster video release.
Yeah, our Social Security series.
Our Social Security series was dominated by the internet and almost over 1,000 views.
Yeah, we're anxious to continue on with some trends of just some basic education and knowledge for clients. I think this series, is going to be just as important, and that's just explaining what different indexes are. So we're going to look at the S&P 500 today. We're going to do another one on the Russell 2000, another one on the Dow Jones, because we get the terminology all the time, the market.
Right. I'm in the market. I'm good.
Oh, the market's not doing good.
The whole market's not doing.
The market's doing good. The market's not doing.
Hold on a second.
Which market are you talking about? Right.
So, what is the S&P 500? Mark, I'll let you start it all. I'll let you start off some history. Of the S&P.
Yeah, some history of the S&P. So, the S&P was a merger of actually two companies. So Henry Poor actually formed Poor Publishing.
Got it.
In the 1800s. So 1860, he formed Poor Publishing, which was a guide to the railroad industry. And in 1923, Standard Statistics Company was actually founded.
Double S's are tough.
Double S's are tough. And they began rating mortgage bonds, different developed companies, computing values weekly, and posting them. And in 1941, those two companies merged
To make the
S&P, Standard & Poor's.
Standard & Poor's Index.
Index fund. Well, Index 500, right? The S&P 500, Standard & Poor's 500. But most people don't realize that can change.
Of course.
It's not set, and there are stipulations of the companies that can be in there.
Right. So think about it like this, right? It's an umbrella, and currently there isn't 500 companies in it. There's 503 companies in it, and every so often a company gets moved out or a company gets moved in
based on criteria and their scrutiny of each company to make sure that they match what they consider one of the top 500 companies in the United States.
So that'd be a great trivia question for trivia night, right? What does S&P mean, right? And then how many companies are in it? I think that's a great trivia question, right?
Well, which can change all the time.
It could change all the time, which is great because it's a trick question.
And actually, speaking of that, I saw a card from the old school Trivia Pursuit.
Oh,
and it had which one of these people have never been president, and it had
Donald
three
Trump.
presidents, and it had Donald Trump on it. It did at the time.
Gotcha.
So that card was probably from the 80s, right, or 90s when.
Well, but it's important though that people know what it means and the history of it, because a lot of people have the S&P in their 401k.
Yeah,
in their brokerage account or in their IRA, they own some of the S&P, right, index.
Yeah, or a lot of people compare their portfolio to the S&P.
Correct.
Right, which I think does a disservice to their portfolio.
I agree.
Because if you think about it, the S&P 500, it's a stock-based index. So
and more importantly, a U.S. large cap stock-based index.
Exactly, and most people's portfolio aren't 100% U.S. stocks.
Right. And
nor should they be.
Right. You literally beat me to it. As soon as we find that, we're like, okay, wait a minute, we got to diversify a little bit here.
Yeah, and there's better benchmarks or combination of indexes that you should be comparing your portfolio to based on your risk tolerances and what you're trying to do with your own individual portfolio. So we don't always want to compare everything to the S&P,
right?
Because it's really in some cases, is like for a retired person that's drawing income off their portfolio, it's not a fair representation of their portfolio.
If I'm drawing income off my portfolio, the S&P is not what I want to compare to, right? Because the S&P is built for growth, not for income.
Yeah, so there's some criteria to get into the S&P. There's 11 different sectors that are represented, and we can go through those in a minute. But those 11 different sectors, there can not be more than 30% in any one sector that's represented in the S&P.
And just so our listeners know, if you go to Yahoo Finance or you go to some type of app, you'll see the Dow 30 and you'll see the NASDAQ and then you'll see the S&P. That's where you can see the baseline. Right, and then you see it scrolling on the bottom of CNN, right? That's where you can actually see the number of what's the value of it right now.
Yeah. So before we get into the criteria of to get on the list, let's talk about the sectors that are represented, and it does a really nice job of representing the economy as a whole. That's why everybody relates to it, because the sectors range from tech healthcare, consumer discretionables,
Large cap.
communication,
Yep.
Financials, so like Ameriprise, American Express, industrial, consumer staples, utilities, real estate, energy, and materials. So, I just threw around 11 things on there that pretty much touch all avenues of our lives as we, conduct our daily business during the day, right? And to get on that list, you're initially, as a company, so if you and I were a company, we need to have a market cap or capitalization of about $15 billion. So we can't be a small company.
We got to be a massive company.
Yeah,
to get on that thing.
We can't be Jim's Fish Fry down the road or what.
We're not a mom and pop. We're not a local shop. I can tell you that.
We're not a local shop. And we also have to have market liquidity. So there has to be some market liquidity. We need to reach volume minimums, about 250,000 shares.
Right. What would be an example? Someone's probably thinking right now, what's an example of a stock that's in the S&P?
Yeah. So an example would be maybe AT&T.
Right, or Apple.
Right.
That would be a stock in the S&P 500.
Alphabet, which is Google for most people, right? That would be a stock that's in the S&P. You're talking 500 of mostly the largest companies in the United States.
Yep.
Right, based in the United States. So pretty much, if you don't know a company on that list, you probably know a product that they represent.
Yep. No, exactly right. But then to go one level deeper, Mark, that there's places out there, Vanguard, Fidelity, right? They offer S&P index funds, so you can buy, right? And that's a good thing for clients to know. They're not all equal. They're not all the same.
Which aren't necessarily all the 500 in the index.
Correct.
It might be 230 or 250 of the index.
Yep.
Right. But their criteria is they're only going to buy stocks in the portfolio from that index.
Right, and that's where I want to make sure our listeners know that this is why it's important to know where you're investing your actual dollars.
And the other two qualifications to get on there is they need to be listed on a American Stock Exchange, so New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ or what have you, and they need to be domiciled in the United States, have at least 50% of their revenue in the United States. Got it. Right, and that kind of qualifies them to get on the list for there. But there's a board that they have to go to, and that board determines whether or not they're on the S&P. So, I think it was last year, right? Tesla was close to getting on it, but they
didn't make the cut, right?
They didn't make
for
the
whatever
cut.
reason.
Most people say, "Whoa, Tesla!" Because it's a popular company, it's well known. But they didn't
meet the criteria.
They didn't meet the criteria, and the board didn't consider them, this round to be on the S&P. Doesn't mean that they can't be. Doesn't mean that they won't be. It's it's kind of like a bid, so to speak. I'm putting my bid in to be on the S&P 500, right? Companies want to be on the
It's
S&P.
a prestigious honor, right? It's a big thing that you get on the S&P 500.
Well, and it drives shareholders there, right? Because institutional investors and individual investors, do look at the people on that or the companies on that to invest. So it drives revenue in the form of purchasing shares of stock in that portfolio to that individual company, which is good. And just kind of give our listeners a little background. So if we go back to like 1926, what would have been the S&P index, changed obviously since 1926 to today. It's averaged approximately 9.8% per year.
Right. That's where you get that. When you talk to somebody that's been in the market a long time, hey, I've seen a great rate of return. Maybe a part of their investment is in the S&P.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's important listeners understand that average of 9.8 means that there were periods of time where the S&P was down 30%.
Right.
Or down 25%.
Right.
So by no means does that mean it's a consistent. And I don't want listeners to think that if I get in there, I'm going to get this rate of return every year, right?
Correct.
It's the
about
average.
Time, not timing.
Yeah.
Always is the case.
Yeah. And, another interesting fact is that, it's posted annual increases or positive returns 70% of the time from 1926 to today.
I wish we had that technology to put a chart up where I know that over a period of market cycles, if I'm in the market for long enough cycles, for more than 5 market cycles, my odds of losing money are so bad that I actually can't really, have the opportunity to have a loss. So
Yeah,
I really
the longer
love that.
the longer you're in a market, the harder it is to lose. Right?
Lose money.
It's opposite at the casino. The longer you're in the
The
casino,
longer you're in the casino, the further deeper you go into the heart of the casino, and now you're lost, and you're spending money on things you don't need.
yeah,
Like bottle cap openers.
yes, the inverse of the S&P.
It's a direct reverse correlation.
Yeah. So but people, I think, need to understand that terminology of the S&P, and we're going to go through the other indexes in other episodes, but I think that gives a nice foundation for what the S&P 500 is. So when you're viewing it or comparing it against your investments, just keep that in mind, because your investments may have 40% in bonds.
Yeah, and the S&P is it does have limitations, right? It's solely based in the United States, or 50% based in the United States, and it's large cap, so you're not getting a full snapshot of the whole economy, but you're getting a good chunk of what our economy is doing. So it does have limitations.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a broad spectrum, analysis.
Yep.
You may be better off in more of a narrow, like picking one of those 11 sectors at a period of time and being in that.
Using one of the other indexes.
Or using one of the other indexes, which we're going to get into the next episode.
Sounds good.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If you have more questions about your portfolio or the S&P and ways that you can analyze it, reach out to us at 43 British American Boulevard in Latham, New York, 12110. You can reach us at 844-444-YTYM for Your Time, Your Money. YourTimeYourMoney.net for your net worth is a great place to go to look at different episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or Google Play. Please like and subscribe. And as always, it's your time
And your money.